Hello, I'm Lynn Bondurant, your host of our series 25 Years of Progress. During this second program, we cover 1960 and 1961 National Aeronautics and Space Administration projects. To set the perspective against other scientific and medical U.S. history in 1960, the Navy submerges a bathyscaphe to a record 24,000 feet in the Pacific Ocean. And in May, the U.S. atomic submarine Triton travels submerged around the world in 84 days. A NASA highlight is the launch of the first U.S. weather satellite on April 1, 1960. Called TIROS-1, it produces almost 23,000 pictures of Earth's weather. This TIROS-1 experimental weather satellite provides dramatic pictures of cloud formations, including spiral formations associated with large area storms. TIROS-1 works in a useful manner for 78 days. It's the world's first successful weather satellite. And ever since then, weather satellites help in weather prediction. Save lives and property through storm detection. Meanwhile, in the manned program, astronauts continue training for their space flights in the Mercury capsule. Astronauts practice with a spaceflight simulator at Lewis Research Center in Cleveland. Strapped firmly, the astronaut spins around first one and then all three axes. They do exercises in bringing spacecraft under control. A spacecraft in orbit travels at a speed which balances very delicately the pull of Earth's gravity. To simulate weightlessness in space, a pilot flies an airplane. The plane descends, begins a steep climb. As the aircraft decelerates, it eases over the top in a parabolic arc. For short periods, its occupants are weightless. Another first for NASA is the launch of Echo-1, the first passive communications satellite. Workers launch it into orbit on August 12, 1960. Echo-1 is really a big balloon. From it, radio signals are bounced, relaying signals between distant locations on Earth. Millions on Earth see Echo as a moving pinpoint of light in the night sky. T. Keith Glennon, NASA's first administrator, recalls.
Echo was a 100-foot in diameter inflatable balloon which was encased perhaps in an aluminum casing of about, I suppose, 30 inches in diameter perhaps. And it was, that case was exploded open when it reached a particular height. And then the balloon inflated. And it stayed up there, just circling the Earth as a matter of what we call injection velocity, when it was injected into orbit. And I can recall going up to Holmdel, New Jersey, where they had a new type of antenna, a horn antenna. You now see them on towers around the country. And we talked to the satellite, and we set pictures over that satellite. I still have one on my desk.
Echo is just the first of many communications satellites. Later communications satellites are much more complicated. They are active, not passive, carry antennas, receivers, transmitters, and other equipment. Modern satellites receive signals transmitted up from Earth and retransmit an amplified signal to distant locations. News, sports, entertainment television, telephone, facsimile, and other communications are now routinely transmitted via satellite. Satellites began a communications revolution. And 1961 is a year of other scientific advances as well. The National Geographic Society announces that the fossilized skull of an early humanoid discovered by Dr. Louis Leakey is 1.7 million years old. Jack Kirby of Texas Instruments invents the integrated circuit. On April 12, 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin becomes the first human being to orbit the Earth. His Vostok 1 spacecraft makes one orbit. Gagarin lands safely. Again, the Soviet Union accomplishes a first while the U.S. is preparing for a suborbital Mercury manned space flight. The Mercury ground tracking network includes 18 stations. Bermuda Station continues undergoing inter-systems checkout. Bermuda duplicates the control center on the mainland. Workers complete and ready the station for operation during April 1961. Other workers complete the final two stations, Kano, Nigeria, and Zanzibar. Scientists simulate orbital flights for training. During 1961, this unmanned test shot is ready for blastoff. The launch fails. But the escape system works, raising confidence for later manned flights.
I think the one thing that strikes me as I look back on the training program is that I have really developed a feeling of confidence. A confidence in the people with whom I work, a confidence in the systems with which I am dealing and will have to deal in flight, and of course, a confidence in myself.
In May 1961, astronaut Alan Shepard prepares for the first U.S. manned spaceflight with a Mercury capsule. The craft is to rise over 100 miles into space in this suborbital flight. Officials schedule the launch for the early morning of May 2, 1961. Weather postpones the launch.
Okay, to resume the count. Roger, ready to resume the count.
On May 5, Shepard goes to the launch complex. It is just 2 years and 7 months after the start of Project Mercury. As countless millions watch and listen, the astronaut manually controls his craft and has almost continuous communications with Earth.
On the periscope, what a beautiful view. Cloud cover over Florida, 3 to 4 tenths near the eastern coast.
The Mercury Redstone 3 travels 300 miles and reaches an altitude of 115 miles.
Okay.
Shepard enjoys about 5 minutes of weightlessness.
Main chute is green. My condition is still good. I'm getting ready for impact.
About 16 minutes after liftoff, the spacecraft is found. A helicopter picks up Shepard and then his Freedom 7 spacecraft. The Mercury suborbital flight is a success, but the Russian Gagarin has orbited the Earth and in a heavier spacecraft. President Kennedy says, quote, "We are behind. The news will be worse before it is better." and it will be some time before we catch up. President Kennedy asked Vice President Lyndon Johnson to head a study of what is needed to beat the Soviets in the space race. NASA's 10-year plan calls for a manned orbital flight around the moon. The question is, can the U.S. be the first nation to orbit a man around the moon? The technical answer is maybe not. So the proposal is made that the goal be extended to the surface of the moon. On May 25, 1961, President Kennedy speaks before a joint session of Congress to define a new national goal.
Now it is time to take longer strides. Time for a great new American enterprise. Time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement, which in many ways may hold the key to our future on Earth. I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space.
As one author writes, NASA is exhilarated but awed. To land a man on the moon and return him to Earth is perhaps the hardest technical project in the nation's history. The Mercury project to orbit a manned spacecraft around the Earth is, by itself, a demanding program. But facing the challenge, NASA begins to work towards the assigned national goal. NASA decides that a two-man Earth orbital spacecraft called Gemini must be developed as a step between the one-man Mercury capsule and the Apollo craft, which is destined to fly men to the moon and back. Project Gemini is to learn of man's capabilities during longer periods of weightlessness. And Gemini is to help train astronauts to maneuver and rendezvous spacecraft during flight. The two-man spacecraft continues under design. Acquisition of the Titan II rocket for Gemini from the Air Force begins. Gemini is the intermediate project between Earth orbital and manned lunar space flights. By October 1961, NASA is already receiving proposals for a three-man spacecraft for moon missions. Officials evaluate proposals. Engineers and scientists of Project Apollo meet with industry people to discuss design and building of the Apollo craft. Companies present their models. On November 29th, officials select the North American Aviation Corporation of Downey, California to be the prime contractor to produce Apollo spacecraft. During 1961, NASA puts 4 successful unmanned scientific satellites in orbit. Other NASA satellites are only partly successful. There are 2 good orbital tests of the Mercury capsule without a man on board. One of the flights carries a chimpanzee, and there are 2 manned suborbital missions, including Shepard's flight.
This is Freedom 7.
Workers launch Explorer 10, March 25, 1961. The 79-pound satellite gathers facts about solar wind, Earth's magnetic field, and its reaction to solar flares. In April 1961, NASA launches the 82-pound Explorer 11. It detects gamma rays from cosmic sources and maps their locations in the sky. This is the first try of that kind of satellite space astronomy. Scientists and engineers put another successful Tyros weather satellite in orbit. And in August 1961, NASA launches the Explorer 12 satellite into a highly elliptical Earth orbit. Explorer 12 investigates solar wind, interplanetary magnetic fields, energetic particles, and the Van Allen belt. The second manned suborbital U.S. spaceflight with astronaut Virgil Grissom aboard is a success, but the spacecraft is to sink in the ocean. Grissom experiences 1.5 Gs. The flight surgeon closely watches the test pilot's condition during flight. Grissom's vital signs are okay. At engine cutoff, the spacecraft makes its turnaround and the astronaut is weightless. The retrieval helicopters are within 2 miles of the landing point. Grissom says he's ready for pickup. As the lead helicopter moves in to hook the capsule, The side hatch is blown off. Grissom leaves the rapidly filling spacecraft. The recovery helicopter struggles with the almost submerged craft. The helicopter is overtaxed by 1,000 pounds. A second recovery helicopter moves in to pick up the astronaut. Grissom has trouble staying afloat. After 4 anxious minutes, Grissom struggles into the horse collar. The lead helicopter's motor apparently malfunctions. The spacecraft drops. Project Mercury continues in high gear, pointing toward a manned orbital mission. On September 13, NASA puts an unmanned Mercury into orbit. One test objective is met early in flight. The Atlas releases the spacecraft into proper orbit. 1 hour and 49 minutes after launch, the spacecraft lands 200 miles east of Bermuda. Enos, the chimpanzee, makes a Mercury flight in November 1961. The chimpanzee arrives at Cape Canaveral from Holloman Air Force Base. Workers put the chimp in a special couch with testers and a pallet and water feeder. He is 39 pounds. During pre-launch testing, Enos is connected to the spacecraft's environmental system. Fitted with numerous biosensors, the primate does tests. Later, NASA launches Mercury with Enos aboard. About an hour into the flight, the spacecraft passes over Mouchet, Australia. Then 5 minutes later, the Woomera, Australia tracking station confirms that all systems are green. A 16mm camera gives a periscope eye view of the cloud formations and the island-dotted Pacific on a condensed time film. Going into the second orbit, tracking stations report steadily rising spacecraft temperatures. Midway through the first leg of the second orbit, Kano, Nigeria reports the spacecraft is reporting intermittent roll and ignore signals. A slight rise in the chimp's temperature concerns flight surgeons. Officials decide not to fly the spacecraft into a third orbit, and they order retrofire. The descent, landing, and recovery are all normal. That afternoon, at a press conference held at Cape Canaveral, NASA officials say that they are pleased with the flight. Astronaut John Glenn is test pilot for the upcoming first manned orbital Mercury mission. Astronaut Carpenter is backup. 1961 is coming to a close, and Enos, the spacefaring chimp, returns triumphantly in December to the Cape. Meanwhile, the Mercury capsule undergoes further tests. There are 2 water landing tests in December 1961. And so 1961 ends, and in that year NASA begins to work on the big job of sending men to the moon and back.
Roger, 0G, and I feel fine. Capsule is turning
During our
around.
next episode, we see film of John Glenn making the first U.S. spaceflight around the world in 1962.
Roger, capsule
And we
turning
continue the
around.
saga of NASA during 25 years of progress. I'm Lynn Bondurant.
Roger, Columbia on a roll. Columbia, Houston, you're go at 40.
Roger, go at 40.
Save lives and property through storm detection. Meanwhile, in the manned program, astronauts continue training for their space flights in the Mercury capsule. Astronauts practice with a spaceflight simulator at Lewis Research Center in Cleveland. Strapped firmly, the astronaut spins around first one and then all three axes. They do exercises in bringing spacecraft under control. A spacecraft in orbit travels at a speed which balances very delicately the pull of Earth's gravity. To simulate weightlessness in space, a pilot flies an airplane. The plane descends, begins a steep climb. As the aircraft decelerates, it eases over the top in a parabolic arc. For short periods, its occupants are National Aeronautics and Space Administration projects.
The clock has started.
To set the perspective against other scientific and medical U.S. history in 1960, the Navy submerges a bathyscaphe to a record 24,000 feet in the Pacific Ocean. And in May, the U.S. atomic submarine Triton travels submerged around the world in 84 days. A NASA highlight is the launch of the first U.S. weather satellite on April 1, 1960. Called TIROS-1, it produces almost 23,000 pictures of Earth's weather. This TIROS-1 experimental weather satellite provides dramatic pictures of cloud formations, including spiral formations associated with large area storms. TIROS-1 works in a useful manner for 78 days. It's the world's first successful weather satellite. And ever since then, weather satellites help in weather prediction. Weightless. Another first for NASA is the launch of Echo-1, the first passive communications satellite. Workers launch it into orbit on August 12, 1960. Echo-1 is really a big balloon. From it, radio signals are bounced, relaying signals between distant locations on Earth. Millions on Earth see Echo as a moving pinpoint of light in the night sky. T. Keith Glennon, NASA's first administrator, recalls.
Echo was a 100-foot in diameter inflatable balloon which was encased perhaps in an aluminum casing of about, I suppose, 30 inches in diameter, perhaps. And it was
Hello, I'm Lynn Bondurant, your host of our series 25 Years of Progress. During this second program, we cover 1960 and 1960